Climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our time. Increasing temperatures, rising sea levels, and extreme weather events are growing ever more common. What can we do about climate change? Innovative business models for clean energy and climate adaptation are a big part of the solution. Plenty of entrepreneurs have great ideas on how they can make an impact. However, it can be challenging to find the investment to get their projects off the ground or to grow their businesses. That's where PFAN comes in. The Private Financing Advisory Network is a global network of climate and clean energy financing professionals, offering free business coaching and investment facilitation to projects and businesses in developing countries, bridging the gap between investors and developers. The PFAN journey begins with an entrepreneur submitting a project proposal, detailing their investment needs. We select high potential projects or businesses and map a pathway to investment. The next step, business coaching, is at the heart of PFAN. We appoint an expert consultant from our network to provide targeted and unbiased one-on-one advice to help entrepreneurs refine their business plans and financial models, something which plays a key role in attracting financing. Once entrepreneurs are ready, we introduce them to suitable investors and, if necessary, provide further support to help make the deal happen. PFAN is funded by our donors, enabling us to provide these services for free. Only projects that successfully attract investment as a result of PFAN support will pay a small success fee to help more entrepreneurs to benefit from our services. If you're an entrepreneur developing a project or scaling up an existing business in clean energy or climate adaptation, a consultant who wants to share your expertise, or an investor looking to make an impact, we would love to hear from you. Let's work together in creating a cleaner, greener planet where businesses are part of the solution.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here with you. My name is Peter DuPont. I'm the Asia Regional Coordinator for the Private Financing Advisory Network, and welcome to this launch of the Pakistan Private Sector Energy Project. The Private Sector Energy Project will work to increase private sector investment in clean energy projects with a focus on achieving financial closures. It focuses on private sector engagement and investment. We're happy to have a lot of private sector engagement in this launch today, and I welcome you to the official launch of the project. So without further ado, I would like to ask Hamad Saeed of the UNIDO Pakistan office to introduce the recitation from the Quran Tilawat. Hamad?
Thank you very much, Peter. We formally start this online session with recitation of few verses from Surah Fatiha of Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
الحمد لله رب العالمين.
All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds.
الرحمن الرحيم.
The entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
مالك يوم الدين.
Sovereign of the day of recompense.
إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين.
It is you we worship and you we ask for help.
اهدنا الصراط المستقيم.
Guide us to the straight path.
صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
path of those upon whom you have bestowed favor, not of those who have evoked your anger or of those who are astray.
Sadaqallahu Azim. Jazakallah. Over to you, Peter, for the event.
Thank you, Hamad. So now, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, the Honorable Malik Amin Aslam. Malik Amin Aslam is the Prime Minister's advisor on climate change. He's a federal minister, as well as serving honorarily as the elected global vice president of IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. From 2002 to 2007, he served as a member of parliament, and from 2004 to 2007 as the Minister for Environment of the government of Pakistan. And in this capacity, he was the architect of the country's national policies on environment and climate change. So we're extremely delighted, Minister, to have you joining us today. And we look forward to your welcome remarks and your observations on the opportunities and challenges for Pakistan's climate change program and plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here at the launch of this PFAN network in Pakistan. Climate change, as you all know, is one of the gravest challenges that we are facing in Pakistan and the world also. But Pakistan is really at the forefront of this issue. We happen to be one of the most impacted countries because of climate change, although we're not a big contributor. But we are willing to play our role responsibly to assist the world in tackling climate change. We've got a very concise and very clear policy in terms of our climate ambitions. And this was put forward by our Prime Minister Imran Khan during the recently concluded Climate Ambition Summit by the UN Secretary General. Pakistan was chosen as one of the 10 top countries to be putting forward their case. And there is a reason for that. And the reason is that our climate strategy is extremely straightforward. It's got two prongs to it. The first one is that we are focusing on nature-based solutions. So we are, through our huge plantation drive called the 10 billion tree tsunami, which is now happening all over Pakistan, and also the protected area initiative, which is expanding our protected area network all over Pakistan again. We are using nature to assist in combating climate change. This is, we think, one of the most effective ways to do it, and it has got a lot of secondary benefits through green jobs and local air pollution benefits that we also get in Pakistan. But that is the first leg of our strategy. The other leg, which is more important to what we are discussing today, is on the energy sector side. On the energy sector side, Pakistan again has come out with a very clear vision on where we want to be in the next 10, 15 years. And we have taken up a very ambitious target of shifting 60% of our energy towards clean energy. We are able to take up this challenge because Pakistan is a country which has got the resources and the opportunity to do that. We are very rich in renewable energy resources, be it hydro, solar, wind. We have got all the opportunities present in Pakistan. But unfortunately, in the past, we've been put on a different sort of trajectory, which was a high carbon trajectory based on coal. We are now going to move away from that. We have committed to move away from that. And we have committed that, we will shift towards renewable energy and clean energy, and hopefully have 60% clean energy by 2030. Now, in going towards this trajectory, we have also shown, action to support the words. So we're not just talking the talk, but we're also walking the talk. We did that recently by shelving two imported coal projects in Muzaffargarh and Rahim Yar Khan, which were about 2,600 megawatts of power, which was supposed to be based on imported coal. So these projects were already signed off and agreed, but we have walked away from that. We have shifted instead towards hydro projects, and we have started 3,700 megawatts of hydro in different parts of Pakistan. So that shows a clear intent of the government and a commitment of the government. We have also started recently a transition towards electric mobility by announcing our first electric vehicle policy. This we think is again a big opportunity for Pakistan to leapfrog our transport into a very clean technology. We have set a target of shifting 30% of our existing power towards clean energy and clean electric vehicles by 2030. So both these targets are part of our clear climate ambition on energy sector side. What we really are missing, and what was one of the gaps, and we hope that the PFAN network is going to fill up that, is to get the private sector engaged in this transition. The government alone cannot do this process. We need the private sector to be mobilized, to be acting as a partner in sharing this vision and implementing these projects of renewable energy and electric vehicles on the ground alongside the government. And we feel that PFAN network has been extremely successful in triggering this transition of the private sector engagement in most countries. So we are very hopeful that this gap between policy and action on the ground through the private sector will be assisted by the PFAN network, and we strongly support what is happening today, and would like to thank UNIDO and USAID for both supporting this initiative. But I would just like to say over here that we need projects on the ground as soon as possible supporting clean energy. So there should be less seminars, less of capacity building activities, and more of projects on the ground, because that is what the climate system needs. We need to have a transition towards clean energy happening on the ground, not just in papers, not just in seminars, but on the ground. So I hope PFAN will be able to do that as soon as possible. From the government side, as I said, we are fully supportive, and I'll be here, fully available to assist in any way I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister, for those compelling words. It's really inspiring to hear about the 60% shift to clean energy by 2030, moving away from the coal trajectory, shelving the 2 imported coal projects you mentioned, and a call for private sector engagement, which is the purpose of this project. So ironically, we have to have another meeting or webinar to get to the actual on the ground implementation. With no further, I'd like to thank you very much. You're welcome to stay on. And we understand that you will need to leave in not too long, but we hope you can stay for a little while, and thank you so much. So now I'd like to move to USAID. I'd like to invite Julie Konen, who is the Mission Director for USAID Pakistan. She joined USAID Pakistan as a Mission Director in September of 2019. Prior to this, she was the Deputy Assistant Administrator in the USAID Africa Bureau. She served as Deputy Mission Director for USAID Nigeria previously, and also as a Senior Development Advisor to the Special Representative for AFPAC, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Prior to joining USAID, Ms. Konen worked for 11 years at an international consulting firm as a Senior Project Director, and her undergraduate degree is in international relations, and her graduate studies are in public management. Ms. Konen, we are delighted to have you here, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's really a pleasure to be here. Let me first greet a few people. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister on Climate Change, Malik Amin Aslam. I enjoyed your speech very much. Also, Dr. Salim, Chief Executive Officer, Pakistan Credit Guarantee Company, representatives from provincial and other government departments, representatives from UNIDO, representatives from the Private Finance Advisory Network, PFAN, representatives from the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Partnership, private sector leaders, US government representatives, including my own USAID colleagues, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me here. Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of the United States government, I am delighted to join you all today in celebrating the launch of USAID's new Pakistan Private Sector Energy Project in partnership with the United Nations Industrial Sector Development Organization and the Private Financing Advisory Network. Let me begin by welcoming all of you to today's event. I'm looking forward to it very much. And we believe that this will be a major step toward increasing investment in climate resilient, cost-effective energy technologies. USAID does have a long history of partnering with the government of Pakistan on energy issues. Over the last decade, our two countries have worked together to add more than 1,000 megawatts of generation capacity and almost 3,000 megawatts of transmission and distribution capacity. These investments have benefited more than 47 million Pakistanis, reduced costs for energy distribution companies by hundreds of millions of US dollars, and leveraged more than US $2 billion in private investment. The program says I'm going to talk about sort of the future directions for USAID in Pakistan in this sector. I think we all know that the Biden administration is just 2 weeks old, I think today. But what we have heard very strong signals that every department and agency in the US government is going to have a strong focus on climate change and green energy. So that's quite encouraging. We don't know right now how that will translate into USAID and to USAID's budget. So we will need to just be a little bit more patient to really understand how this is going to play out. Although we don't envision any new large-scale infrastructure collaborations in the near future, we will continue to provide technical assistance to our partners in the power sector here in Pakistan. Part of that assistance means enabling Pakistan to successfully transition to a competitive electricity market. That will ensure that Pakistan can meet its growing energy needs, not just for the near term, but for future economic growth. To do this, we all need to work closely with the private sector to develop innovative, financially sustainable energy projects. This work is critical. Sustainable, low-cost energy is a key ingredient in Pakistan's development, and the energy sector has great investment potential through a variety of renewable and clean energy resources here in Pakistan, which the minister referenced: solar, wind, water, biomass. Fortunately, the private sector has the creativity and the motivation to use these abundant renewable resources. This will strengthen economic development and create new jobs for a growing population while helping Pakistan meet its ambitious renewable energy and climate goals. In partnership with UNIDO, our new Pakistan private sector energy project will provide many opportunities to explore low carbon, climate resilient technologies. Together, we will learn what works best for Pakistan, in particular, what is financially and economically sustainable. Financial sustainability is critical, as it will drive new investment and allow for the growth of new ideas. The Private Finance Advisory Network will play a critical role in identifying new and creative projects, demonstrating their bankability, and helping them find the financing needed to make them a reality. I'm confident that you will find today's event informative and compelling. We're all looking forward to working with you as we continue to support Pakistan's development of sustainable, low-cost energy technologies. Thank you. Shukriya.
Thank you so much, Ms. Conan, for those words. And it's great to hear that the U.S. is back. I actually had a job previously as USAID's Senior Climate Change Advisor based at the Regional Development Mission in Bangkok. So it's great to hear that the new administration will have a strong focus on climate change and clean energy. And we look forward to seeing how that pans out. Great to hear just some of the work that USAID has done in terms of the 2,000 megawatts of generating capacity, 3,000 megawatts of transmission and distribution, leveraging $2 billion of private investment. But what we're here today, and as the minister called us to arms, is to really develop innovative and sustainable and bankable climate and clean energy solutions. And this project is focusing on clean energy solutions to help solve Pakistan's development problems. It's really great. I next would like to move on to UNIDO. I'd like to introduce Ms. Nadia Aftab. Nadia is currently the UNIDO country representative for Pakistan. And I should just say, by way of how the pieces fit together, that USAID actually ran and operated PFAN for the first 12 or 13 years. And then a few years ago, the management or operation of PFAN was turned over to UNIDO. We'll hear about that today with support from REAP. So it's great to introduce you, Ms. Aftab, and a little bit more about your background. Ms. Aftab is a seasoned development professional with a specialization in environmental management, more than 15 years experience in strategic planning, program development, results-based management, technical advisory, and institutional capacity building. She joined UNIDO in 2008, which happened to be the year that Barack Obama was elected. And we could start saying climate change again after we couldn't say it during the president before Barack Obama, but that's just a footnote. Ms. Aftab has helped to strengthen UNIDO's portfolio in Pakistan. She's contributed to identifying and developing new projects and programs in the areas of climate change adaptation and mitigation, including agro-industry, agro-food development, cleaner production, green industry, resource and energy efficiency, CSR, and youth entrepreneurship with a special emphasis on women's empowerment and gender mainstreaming. So Ms. Aftab, you have the floor, and it's so great to have you here at this launch. We look forward to hearing your wise words.
Thank you so much, Peter. Let me begin with saying my greetings to Excellency Malik Amin Aslam, Special Advisor to the Prime Minister on Climate Change, Honorable Ms. Julie Conan, Mission Director, USAID Pakistan, our colleagues from UNIDO headquarters, representatives from government, industries, financial sector, energy professional, consultants, team of USAID, PFAN, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to have the presence of you all at the official launch of USAID UNIDO PFAN project in Pakistan. Let me start by reiterating the introduction of United Nations Industrial Development Organization, which is the specialized agency of the United Nations that promote industrial development for poverty reduction, inclusive globalization, and environmental sustainability. Besides this, UNIDO's mandate is fully recognized in Sustainable Development Goal SDG 9, which calls to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation, apart from contributing towards other SDGs, which are very close to UNIDO's mandate. It is estimated that global action to reduce greenhouse gas emission could deliver $26 trillion in net global economic benefit between now and 2030. Similarly, investing in adapting to climate change also stands to reap dividend. The ongoing shift towards clean energy and climate resilient industries presents an important business and sustainable development opportunity. Let me talk a little bit about Pakistan. There are around 3.3 million small and medium enterprises. These consist of, among us, many other variants, service providers, manufacturing units, and startups. And you all know SMEs make up over 30% of Pakistan GDP and approximately 25% of generating exports. Being at the grassroots, they understand and can develop solutions to local issues, which in turn can fill a gap in larger markets and help to drive the transition to a low carbon economy. However, businesses may not be ready for these opportunities, maybe not at the moment. At one hand, they may lack a business and financial acumen to create a commercially viable business plan. On the other hand, they may struggle with accessing finance due to their limited network of investors and limited financial skill, which Honorable Minister has also said that he is very pleased to bring the private sector in the business, because the private sector, if they comes in, they can bring in some investment which these companies or SMEs may need to make them more viable. Having this background, UNIDO has adopted a unique approach, and it provides targeted support to businesses and entrepreneurs to help them reap the benefit of clean energy transition. UNIDO is working in Pakistan since last 50 years. I mean, 2 years back, we celebrated our 50 years of cooperation with Pakistan and successfully implemented more than 50 wide range projects for the development of SMEs and industrial sectors. UNIDO's existing energy programs provide technical assistance to promote integrated energy solutions for inclusive and sustainable industrial development, ISIT, It also supports Pakistan by increasing the economic competitiveness and the viability of their enterprises through sustainable, modern, and low carbon energy solutions. By promoting renewable energy technologies and energy efficiency for industrial applications, our programs aim to reduce the adverse impact of industrial processes on the environment, as well as increase the resilience of communities to climate change, which in fact is also very close to my heart. This launch today is indeed a remarkable one, as it sets ground for a new partnership between USAID and UNIDO. And I'm sure that this will go a very long way in promotion of clean energy projects in Pakistan. The project will focus on private sector engagement and investment in the energy sector, specifically expanding the portfolio of commercially viable small and medium scale energy projects, and to provide support to enable them to access financing and other financial flows. As you may all know, that Private Financing Advisory Network, PFAN, which will be implementing the project, has unmatched experience in matching private finance with innovative, low carbon, and climate resilience projects in developing and emerging countries. Since its inception in 2006, PFAN has been identifying private sector projects, provided coaching to almost 1,000 project developers in improving their business plans and financial models, and it helped them secure funding. Mr. Honorable Minister and Ms. Julie Conan also mentioned that Pakistan is having abundant renewable energy resources, which comes from solar, wind, biomass, small hydro, and it's only finding the right financing and right kind of policies, which I know that the government is very working entirely to tap these potentials. And they have fixed a target of like 30% renewables by 2030, which is a huge and a great target, and can be met easily with the support of all the development and government partners. I'm confident that our project will be instrumental in supporting Pakistan to reach its targets of renewable energy and to unlock its untapped potential in renewable energy sectors. As my colleagues will elaborate later on traditional PFAN services offering, but trust me that for Pakistan, it is going to be like more customized, and it will complement the specific barriers which are in Pakistan. And we are going to do our best to address those barriers. Most notably, a holistic capacity building element is also embedded in the project design, which will improve the skills and resilience of local financial institutions and public institutions. I hope that this project will bring a positive change in the investment climate of clean energy in Pakistan. And I would like to say thank you and best of luck to all the participants from government, Honorable Minister, USAID, PFAN, UNIDO, financial sector, private sector, policymaker, all who have taken time out to contribute to today's sessions. And I'm looking forward for the interactive discussions later this day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Aftab, for those remarks, and really highlighting some of the challenges and the importance of driving the transition to a low carbon economy through the small and medium enterprises, which is a major focus of the project, which we'll hear about momentarily. A couple of housekeeping remarks. For those of you listening, we welcome you to submit questions in the Q&A button, which should be at the bottom of your screen. You can just type in a question and we'll try to get to it in one of the two different, either the short Q&A we will have shortly in a few minutes, or the longer panel discussion, which will happen in the next hour. And also, I already see that we have discussions happening on efficient new technologies, and some people who are providing technologies are sharing information about that in the chat box. So that's also a good way to introduce yourself. I recommend anyone who's interested to introduce themselves and say who they are and why they're here. That's why we have the chat button. Now we'd like to move on, and we have a couple of presentations introducing the project that we're launching today, which is the Pakistan Private Sector Energy Project. And I would highlight something that Ms. Aftab said that this project is building on an existing platform of experience that PFAN has working across the region and in Pakistan. But with the USAID partnership now, this is a enlarged and expanded and tailored project that we will be launching. So it's a new PFAN for Pakistan. And now I'd like to introduce Rabia Bukhari. Rabia is with USAID Pakistan. She's a program management specialist in the energy team. She joined USAID in 2010 as a program management specialist. Currently, she's working on as a private sector engagement lead for the energy sector and managing this project, among others. And this project, as mentioned earlier, is being implemented by UNIDO and PFAN. She is also the manager for the Clean Energy Loan Guarantee Project with local commercial banks. And she previously managed infrastructure rehabilitation and a 2-well efficiency improvement project for the energy sector. Prior to joining USAID, Ms. Bukhari worked for an international NGO, Save the Children, and she holds a master's in business administration with majors in project management. And Ms. Bukhari, we look forward to hearing more about the project, and thank you for your time. I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Hello, good afternoon, and assalamu alaikum, everyone. It was honor to have the Minister for Climate Change presiding our launching ceremony for Pakistan Energy Private Sector Project. I would like to sincerely thank everyone, our panelists, our distinguished guests, provincial and other government departments, the private sector, USAID and USG colleagues, and UNIDO and PFAN colleagues as well. Thank you very much for joining us today. Little bit building on what has already been said by Nadia, that why we are coming up with this project in Pakistan with a more focused approach tailored to Pakistan with the help of PFAN. So the major problems which have been faced by SMEs, she has already highlighted some of those. I will not go into further detail of what SMEs are facing, but definitely there are significant challenges which SMEs face, due to which we have actually decided to enter into this space and work with PFAN with a tailored approach to support and provide advisory services specifically to small, medium-sized enterprises. We are not excluding the larger IPPs here, but as we go forward with the project, we will be looking at an initial market scoping, talking to many of you in person, and meeting the energy departments in the provinces as well, at the national level as well, and deciding after that what exactly kind of interventions we need to do. So the major reason we brought PFAN into this project was that they bring the right skill set and the expertise in the clean energy, climate resilient projects, business coaching, investment matchmaking in the emerging markets similar to Pakistan. So that is why we thought if they are already active in Pakistan on a smaller scale, and they're working through their existing country coordinator. So let's build on what they have already developed and expand their work and officially launch them with our USAID support. So the reason being that PFAN, we are also in the process of hiring our specialized management team for this USAID specific interventions and expanding the portfolio of PFAN in Pakistan. Beyond what they have been doing previously. So let me just explain a little bit on the main objectives of the project. I will not go in detail that what PFAN works and how that is going to help. That will be further explained by UNIDO colleague after me in the form of PowerPoint presentation in terms of process, how this is gonna work. Mainly the 3 objectives we have agreed on to be met for the project. Those are capacitating the entrepreneurs, smaller and medium scale businesses to develop bankable projects. Why the focus is a lot on bankable and commercially and environmentally sustainable projects? Because sustainability is the key to everything. And bankability is important because often the SMEs and other project developers who face problems in accessing finance is the issue with doing their projects bankability. So we want to make sure that we develop and help refine the proposals for the businesses that they are able to present their projects in more bankable way, and investors and financiers are able to then assess them and are able to actually give them financing. Unless they are bankable, unless they are economically and financially and commercially sustainable and viable, the financiers face problem and they feel hesitant to provide financing. So we want to actually bridge that gap between the financiers, entrepreneurs, and businesses to develop the skills where they lack the technical and financial know-how and the technological improvements which are taking place every day now as the world is moving towards more technologically digitization. So all these things would be the key. The second objective is that we will also be developing a risk mitigation strategies and tools for the investors to mitigate their risk and also help at the same time the developers, the businesses to remove their perceived risk as well. The third main objective for the project is going to be that we would like to mainstream the investment in clean energy, climate resilient, sustainable projects for a sustainable long-term development. And that would be happening through investors forums, a lot of capacity building for the developers and financiers to better assess the projects, and looking forward to doing that matchmaking wherever the gaps exist. So these will be the main objectives. And with that, I guess I would hand it over to Peter, and he can ask UNIDO PFAN manager to give us more detailed presentation in terms of the size of the project and what exactly the segments we are going to focus on. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to field those questions after the technical session is over. Thank you very much, everyone.
Right. Thank you very much, Ms. Bukhari, and for that overview. And just again, we will, after the next presentation, we'll have time for Q&A. We already have some questions coming into the Q&A channel. So far, we have a couple, and I hope we get some more. Any questions you have, please type them in there. And again, just to sort of recap some of the main elements of this PPSE program: building capacity, develop bankable projects, risk mitigation strategies and tools, and mainstreaming investments in clean energy and climate resilient projects. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Patrick Nussbaumer, to expand and provide some more background about PFAN and also about this particular project, some more details of the project to help flesh it out for those of you who are joining this webinar today. And a little bit of background about Patrick. He is a program manager at UNIDO in Vienna. He develops and implements technical assistance interventions in developing countries in the area of sustainable energy, environmental management, and climate technologies. And prior to joining UNIDO, he worked for several years on energy issues in academia, as well as in the private sector. His background is in engineering, and it is complemented by a PhD in environmental science and technology. So Patrick, welcome. You have the floor, and we look forward to hearing more about the program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellency, distinguished participants, dear colleagues from USAID, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be part of this official launch and to introduce the Pakistan private sector energy project. On behalf of UNIDO, which is the hosting of PFAN in collaboration with REAP, the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Partnership. A warm welcome to all participants to today's webinar. I will start to set the scene with a few words about PFAN, the Private Financing Advisory Network, to provide some context to this project that we are implementing in collaboration with USAID. What PFAN does is essentially to facilitate access to financing for clean energy and climate projects. And it does that by building a pipeline of investment-ready propositions that are then introduced to financiers. PFAN mobilizes private financing with the objective to contribute to the implementation of the Paris Agreement and is in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly those that pertains to clean energy, industry, climate action, but also gender equality as well as partnership. PFAN, in a few numbers, PFAN has been supporting a vast number of projects across different regions, 150 of which by now have reached financial close, which together total 1.8 billion of investments mobilized. That translates into just over 1 gigawatt of clean energy generation capacity and 4 million tons of CO2 emission abated on an annual basis. The premise behind PFAN is trying to address market barriers and support the engagement of the private sector in line with the plea that we have heard from his honorable minister. On the one hand, what we see in the market is that there often are good projects on the side of SMEs and project developers, but those have the tendency to lack the capacity to turn those ideas into bankable propositions. On the other hand, we see a lot of capital being available and financing instruments being established, looking for those opportunities, but at times struggling to find those opportunities in the market. So this realization is very much in line with the objective of this intervention as outlined by Ms. Bukhari. Supporting the project developers and the SME in pushing their ideas towards something that an investor would be ready to look at and able to look at. Supporting the investors and the financier looking for those projects and assessing their projects and mitigating the risk, as well as providing a role of matchmaking, so pushing the projects towards the resources and the resources towards the project. The way this works concretely is that PFAN goes out in the market and looks for projects in the clean energy and climate space, on the basis of which they are appraised and evaluated by financing experts, and we select the most promising projects to receive support through this mechanism. PFAN then assigns the support based on the specific needs of those projects, and once they have matured, PFAN starts to introduce those to prospective investors, either through one-to-one introduction or in the context of investment forum or investors roadshow. All of this, obviously, with the objective to bring those undertaking to financial close. We are very enthusiastic to be working with USAID on the Pakistan private sector energy. And we bring through PFAN an extensive experience in frontier markets, an approach and a methodology that has been refined over the years and that has proven to be effective. We also bring a wide-ranging investors network, as well as a global structure that is able to support the activities in Pakistan. PFAN has been active in Pakistan and still is active in Pakistan. with the support of various donors, but as the Master of Ceremony has noted, this collaboration with USAID allows us to have a new start for enlarged, standalone, and specific PFAN activities in the country. In that process, it is our intention to expand the local capacity. I should note that the vast majority of the services that are delivered through PFAN is delivered through local capacity with experts that are in the markets where we operate, including in Pakistan. We are also envisaging to enlarge the team supporting this activity. And I take the opportunity to note that we are currently recruiting the dedicated team that will backstop those activities in Pakistan. And further information is available on the UNIDO website under employment. We would like to enhance the investment facilitation services of PFAN with downstream and upstream activities in the form of, on the one hand, capacity building of financial institutions, but also early stage support, trying to support SMEs and entrepreneurs that are not quite ready to receive the traditional PFAN support, but that we feel will be ready in, say, 12, 18 months' time to make sure that we have a buoyant pipeline in the coming future. We are also planning to source projects that we will look at supporting through partners and to liaise with public actors active in this space. And then last but not least, we will make connections and build synergies with relevant initiatives. Those are undertaken by the government of Pakistan, but also other activities of USAID, UNIDO, and other relevant actors. The intended substantive focus, as we see it with our colleagues from USAID at this point, looks as follows. First, from the perspective of market segments, we plan to dedicate our attention to captive generation. So energy services that would be, for example, in use in industrial processes. We also intend to look into distributed generation in the form of microgrid and off-grid solutions, and that's including in underserved contexts. We are looking at promoting renewable energy for productive uses, as well as clean cooking solutions. And as it was mentioned earlier, IPP type of projects are not excluded from this intervention, but not the focus, at least not at this point. In terms of the technologies and the solutions that we are looking at, solar has a vast potential, and we've heard it from the Honorable Minister. Rooftop as well as off-grid solutions, small hydro as well as wind and biomass. We are also looking at opportunities in terms of circular economy and energy efficiency to a lesser extent. And as it was mentioned a number of times during this webinar, the drive that we see around e-mobility. In terms of the business models that we would like to support in the context of this project, we see good prospect for solutions that are behind the meter. So in the context of commercial operations or industry operations. We also see traction for energy as a service for both industrial requirements and rural needs. And we also see exciting developments when it comes to digitalization and Industry 4.0, which is opening up opportunities in terms of business model that were unthinkable only a couple of years ago. We will pay close attention to the gender dimension, both in our own operations as well as in delivering our services. We will look into the gender issue as we recruit the team, of course, but we're also looking at the gender dimension when we support projects. So we will give particular attention to those SMEs and projects that are women-led, women-owned, but also look at those that are producing products or services that make a significant contribution to the gender equality agenda. We are open for business. This intervention is live. We are looking for applications for projects. Those are the application process is through the website, and I'll say a few more words about this. But I want to stress that we are in operation. We are looking for receiving projects. We are actively looking for projects and ready to deliver services in the context of this project. A few words about the application process. As I mentioned, the application is running through our web portal. We accept application on a continuous basis, and we do evaluate those applications on a quarterly basis, or earlier if needed. There are clear eligibility criteria, and I would say a few more words about those, but those are spelled out in the material that you can find on our web portal. The documents that we expect for the application includes a project proposal, a financial model, and an executive summary. And in the context of those, I want to stress that we are committed to the highest standards of confidentiality, as it is clear to us that the information that is shared with us is sensitive around personal and project data. Once we receive the applications, they are reviewed and evaluated by a group of experts that are providing recommendation for support through this initiative. In terms of what we are looking for, there are a few criteria that we're looking at in reviewing the projects. First, we're looking for projects that are technically viable. Along the years, we have realized that it is important to have an experienced management team that is supporting the project or the business. As mentioned, we're looking for a development and gender impact in addition to the positive climate contribution. And more importantly, we are looking at solutions that are commercially viable or moving towards becoming commercially viable. In terms of the size of the project, we're typically looking at projects that are looking for anything between $1 and $50 million US in terms of investment. And we engage with projects that are either greenfield or scale-up operation, and have found that we're most effective for projects that are in a maturity stage, that are looking for the first round of external financing. We're looking for clean energy and climate adaptation projects with an approach that is technology neutral. So we're looking for solutions that are making an impact in those two spaces. Just a few words about what we call the journey of a project, if you want, so an open-ended call for projects. And as I mentioned, this is already live. We look at those projects and evaluate to inform the decision on whether we provide technical assistance to those. We assign business coaching and support those projects before they mature, and we are able to introduce them to investors. We also have available what we call a tipping point technical assistance, which is a mechanism through which we can deal with the last hurdle, the last barrier before we hopefully reach a financial close. A few more words about the specifics of the service offering. I spent a little bit of time to talk about project origination and the way we are looking for projects in the markets. Once we have those in our pipeline, we provide business coaching. We support the developers and the SME prepare the business plan. We advise on the investment structure and the ask. We support the structuring financially of the project. And then we also prepare the SME of the project to face an investor in terms of the preparation of the pitch and the material that is required. On the investment facilitation side, so towards the end of the process, we look for investors that have a matching investment appetite, introduce those, provide support in terms of the transaction and around the negotiation and the closing. All of this is running in parallel to work with the investors and outreach. We maintain a database of investors. We engage actively with those. To some extent, we also build the capacity of those investors, and also at times receive referrals from those investors from projects that are not quite ready for those investors to work with. I'll conclude here by thanking you for your attention for this presentation. I would like to stress that we are very enthusiastic about contributing to Pakistan's effort with regards to the clean energy transition and addressing climate change. We are grateful for the collaboration and the trust that we have received from USAID. And most importantly, I want to repeat that we are open for business and looking forward to receiving applications through our portal. Thank you very much. And back to you, Mr. Chair.
Patrick, please stay in the panel. Keep your video on if you could. Thanks for that great presentation. I'd like to invite Ms. Bukhari and Ms. Aftab to join a panel discussion. And so we can go for about 15 minutes or so. We have a lot of questions. Some of them are quite technical. Some of them are a little bit more programmatic in nature. And some of them the team has already been answering online, but I will try to, could I ask this panel is just for the first 4 speakers, so not for the panelists. Mr. Salim, if you could turn on, yeah. So this is just, I'll stick mostly to the questions that are higher level or about the program, and I'll address them, some of them individually or some of them to the 3 of you. So again, thank you for joining this panel discussion. The question just popped up at the end, and the question was about the ticket size, whether the ticket size for PFAN is $1 to $50 million. So perhaps, Patrick, you could address that because that's sort of a guideline. Do you want to address that, Patrick?
Thank you, Peter, with pleasure. So the sweet spot, as we like to think of it, is indeed a ticket size that is anything between $1 and $50 million. We are, however, quite flexible with this, particularly when it comes to the smaller projects. And we are interested in engaging with smaller projects, so below 1 million ticket size, particularly when the core benefits are very obvious and explicit. So this is a guideline, 1 to 50 million, but not a strict guideline. If there are any projects that are below particularly and to some extent above that bracket, we will look at those and treat them on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. And now I'm starting to warm up, and I hope it's okay if I call you Nadia and Rabia. We're past the formal part. And so Nadia and Rabia, there's a question. Actually, it's a question I have, which I think is an important question. Either or both of you, could you sort of describe why the focus of this program is on the SME sector? So Rabia first, perhaps, and then Nadia.
Yeah, SMEs, as I mentioned initially, and Nadia also pointed out, the focus is because nearly, I don't have exact estimates, but if 30% to 40% economy is consisting of SMEs, they can play a significant role in countries' economic development. And the focus of SMEs for our project is that we have supported through our larger scale infrastructure and other interventions previously through technical assistance to larger IPPs. And I see there's already a ARE policy in place. We have a commitment to renewable energy, larger projects as well to coming online. But besides that, because there is a huge population in the country which lives rural side, and the SMEs are the ones who can, with the low investment, can help bring more job opportunities for such communities and create more well-being. And if we will develop their capacity and bring them to a level that they are able to work self-sufficiently themselves after some initial startup support, then they can contribute a lot to the economic development. So that is why we thought to work with SMEs specifically in this project. But as we said, we are not excluding larger IPPs.
Right. Okay, so an important distinction first on the 1 to 50 million is a guideline. It's somewhat flexible, and the SME focus is not exclusive. Nadia, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I think because we as UNIDO we work directly with small and medium enterprises. That is our focus, and we build their capacities to operate sustainably. In Pakistan, everybody knows that energy is a major issue. I mean, uninterrupted energy supply to SMEs is something which is still not being met. And for that, I think the renewable energy can play a very good role to sustain these small and medium enterprises to run their businesses sustainably. I can quote you one example because we are currently running a program on, it's called Sustainable Sustainable Energy Initiatives and Industries in Pakistan. And basically what we are doing, we are providing support to these SMEs to have solar grids at their rooftop so that their energy needs can be met. If not 100%, at least 50 or 60, 70% could be met by this renewable energy resources. The other point is in SMEs there in Pakistan, I mean in countries like Pakistan, the potential for you can say energy efficiency is huge because these small and medium enterprises, they are not much focused on how they can conserve and how they can be more efficient in terms of using the energy. So this kind of support which UNIDO is already providing, and with PFAN, with this much larger scale project, thanks to USAID, I think we can bring in some more positive aspect of conserving the energy at one side, and also providing, you can say, alternate or renewable energy resources at the other side. And this will contribute for the sustainable running of the businesses, which ultimately contribute to the economy. Yeah, so this is all from my side. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And then I have a couple of, we'll go for about 5 more minutes and then we'll jump into the panel discussion. A couple of questions maybe for Rabia, and Patrick might expand, but just about eligibility. And I believe you answered one of them, Rabia, in the Q&A chat, but I'm going to ask it again so everyone can hear it. So question about, first is, PFAN works in energy efficiency and renewable energy generation. Will this program, the PPSE program, work in the area of transmission and distribution? So that's one question. And the related question is about the great potential for waste in Pakistan and waste to energy, and will this program address that? So I'll let you start first, Rabia, and then Patrick, in case you want to add anything.
Okay, I responded a little bit on the chat box, but waste to energy is something we're not excluding. That is not a top priority for USAID right now, I would say, but it's not excluded. We are doing an initial market scoping that will help us actually refine our interventions and guide us in terms of what other new technologies and segments within clean energy can also be focused. So waste to energy is part of that, including energy efficiency, and we will be definitely looking into supporting that. But there are some regulatory and policy framework and other issues that also needs to be handled for waste to energy, which we will be definitely be looking into while we do the scoping, and then decide what exactly our assistance can look like to that segment, basically. in this project, we are not gonna focus on transmission and distribution sectors per se, not exact detailed or larger focus of this project is more on advisory services, matchmaking between entrepreneurs and investors and businesses, and building the capacity and mainstream investment and risk mitigation, basically, as I explained earlier. So the transmission and distribution sectors are not, which we have ignored completely, are USAID other projects which are already ongoing, and there are a couple of which are coming online very soon. They will continue USAID support in that sectors to strengthening the transmission and distribution networks, building their capacity. We will continue our support in terms of wholesale market structure that will bring more actually open and transparent procurement system in the country. And we want that there is, we avoid and reduce the further burdening of the distribution network. So we are also willing and supportive of wheeling and also distributed generation and off-grid distributed generation as well, so that we can reduce that poor connectivity issues in some of the rural areas where there is access to electricity, but the grid connectivity is not good. So all those other sources and the technologies are really picking up around the world, and PFAN has expertise in those areas. In emerging markets like Pakistan, they have worked. So that's why we are promoting those. So, but transmission and distribution is not excluded. We will be through other programs, will be providing support, but not exclusively under this program.
Thank you very much, Rabia. So I think we've got a ton of questions, and then people are starting to exchange emails to take this offline. It's fantastic. I think I'd like to get to the panel discussion, but before that, I'd like to ask one question. It's a bit of a softball for you, Patrick. The question is, actually it's about bankable projects. There is a question about what is a bankable project, which we'll cover in the panel discussion. But there's a related question about how PFAN delivers assistance to the project developers to help them develop bankable projects. So this will be the last question in this panel, and then I'll hand it over to Saima Kadir for the panel discussion. So Patrick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. How does PFAN provide services to the developer? Very much customized and based on the specific needs of that particular project or that particular SME. Some of those projects are coming to us in the form that requires a lot of work and a lot of support. And for those, we dedicate experts that are helping the developer in working through the business plan, refining and stress testing the business model, testing the assumptions, and working on the material that is required for the investors to engage. Some of the projects are coming to us that already have all of this, and what they require mostly is an introduction to prospective investors. So we do provide that in terms of refining the project and looking for the appropriate investors to talk to, and facilitating the matchmaking and supporting the deal. So to answer the question, very much targeted on the needs of the project that we deal with a broad range of services that we can offer, with always the ultimate objective to push that project or business to financial close.
Well, thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you, Rabia, and thank you, Nadia, for staying around and answering some questions. And we're going to go into a very dynamic and diverse panel with government and private sector representation. So I'll let you take your leave and go back to the bleacher seats to watch the rest of this before I now turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Saima Kadir, who is has a long experience in finance, investment, and clean energy. She, for the past several years, has been active as the PFAN country coordinator. And just to dispel any confusion, this was raised before, but PFAN has country coordinators in 12 countries across Asia. And my job with a small team is to help coordinate their work. It's been a pleasure to work with Saima. She has been running the Pakistan program, originating projects, and talking to the government and finding ways to sort of move the ball forward on clean energy and climate investment. This new enhanced initiative will have a slightly, a focus on SMEs, as we've been discussing, and will be an enlarged program which will run in parallel with the existing program, which will continue to have ongoing call for proposals, and they'll be very closely coordinated. So Simon, I'm going to hand this over to you. We've got a great panel, and take it away.
Thank you, Peter. Assalamu alaikum, and a very good afternoon to everyone. A very warm welcome to our distinguished panelists and participants. The format of this panel will be that I will ask individual questions of the panelists, and then they will have about 3 minutes to respond. In a bit of housekeeping, unfortunately, Mr. Usman Ahmed on the agenda, CEO of Nizam Energy, had a very urgent matter come up last minute, so he will not be speaking, but we will still have a very rich discussion. So the general context for this panel is, what are the financing gaps and capacity needs for SMEs in the climate and clean energy sectors in Pakistan? How can PFAN help? What is needed? And if possible, if the panelists could please also address the differences in access to finance for the larger SMEs versus the medium versus smaller SMEs, because they do, there is a difference. So I'm delighted to start with Dr. Mohammed Salim Zia, CEO of the Pakistan Credit Guarantee Company. And sir, my question for you is, given your previous roles at the State Bank of Pakistan and developing climate change there, as well as involvement in the renewable energy scheme, what is your view of what have been the experiences and learnings to date, and what would it take to further develop and capacitate a financing ecosystem for SMEs and clean energy in Pakistan and climate in Pakistan? Thank you.
Thank you, Saima, and thank you all the participants. What I believe that, and you will agree that, as mentioned by Honorable Minister, that Pakistan is facing a climate change issue. And secondly, we have also issue of access to finance, especially to SME and RE projects as well. To address these two issues, I believe that we need to follow a very comprehensive and holistic approach. To develop such an approach or strategy, we need to design a regulatory framework, what we call that we need to create an enabling environment. For enabling environment, we need to introduce some new laws. Maybe we need to introduce amendments in existing laws to create a level playing field for all the stakeholders, which includes government, the private sector, and financial institution as well. Because this climate change and access to finance is a new area, especially financial institutions, and in Pakistan as well. So we need to create an enabling environment by introducing some rules and regulations and the policy and the guidelines for all the stakeholders. And second pillar, or the second steps I think we need to take, is that we need to introduce some public finance mechanism as well. What does this mean? It means that the government has to introduce some incentivized mechanisms for private sectors to enter into climate related projects, so that they can originate climate oriented projects or RE projects. For example, the government can introduce some tax incentives. They can declare some specialized economic zones where RE related projects can be established, or RE related technologies can be introduced. So there should be some incentive for the stakeholders by the government, whether the federal or the provincial, it doesn't matter. The third thing is that, again, to address this climate financing issue or RE financing issue is that either government of Pakistan or the Central Bank of Pakistan should introduce some specialized, cheaper financing schemes. As the State Bank did in 2014, they have introduced RE refinance scheme, which is available by the financial institutions. And under that scheme, several clean energy projects has been established during 2014 until today. Secondly, we need to have a credit enhancement mechanism, because the banks think, because when I was in the State Bank, the bank were considering that RE projects, climate-related projects, they are very risky business, and they don't understand this technology and the sector as well. To motivate commercial banks, so we need to develop some credit enhancement mechanism. For this purpose, the government of Pakistan and the State Bank has established Pakistan credit guarantee companies, and we are providing credit guarantee coverage to financial institutions so that they can lend to RE projects at a reasonable rate, definitely. So the point is that the government of Pakistan, the central bank, has to come up forward and has to introduce some specialized financing instrument as well. One example is already given, that they have RE financing scheme, and we have a credit enhancement or credit guarantee scheme as well to promote RE in Pakistan as well. The fourth area which we can consider to promote access to finance in RE project is that we need to enhance capacity building of financial institutions. We need to enhance capacity building of end users as well. How to originate bankable projects. So sometimes banks are ready to finance those projects, but they don't receive a bankable projects. So there is a lack of capacity at both sides, commercial banks and as well as end user or project sponsors as well. So we need to train them. So simultaneously, we need to create awareness so that there is a demand for RE projects. How? We need to create awareness among project sponsors and users that RE projects like solar home solutions, they are good for them. So they are good for our environment, they are good for our climate, they are investment friendly as well. So we need to create awareness as well. So if we follow all these 4-5 pillars together, so I believe that we can increase access to finance in Pakistan, especially RE related projects as well. And Pakistan Credit Guarantee Company can be a partner with PFAN, which can provide a risk coverage to PFAN projects through commercial banks or financial institutions. And this will basically motivate commercial banks so that they can lend money to PFAN projects, which is a key issue that we need to address.
Thank you, Dr. Salim. We look forward to collaborating with you. Our next speaker is from the private sector, Mr. Mujtaba Khan from Rion Energy. Rion is a very well-established company that has seen a great deal of success in this market, and they've been very active, in particular on rooftop solar and off-grid. So my question for you is from a private sector perspective. How do you see this market developing against the background of not only the ARE policy, which you know determines what projects are able to be developed and how, but the broader evolving energy sector policies? And within that, what opportunities and challenges do you see for the private sector and project developers like yourself, and in particular, capitalizing on these opportunities? And what would you need from somebody like PFAN, hopefully, to help you break through some of those challenges? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Saima. I think first thing I just want to say is, 3 minutes a bit unfair for, explaining all of the issues that we have in the power sector. I think for those of you who are knowledgeable, I think I'll just try and simplify things. Look, a Pakistani energy sector, you have to look at it from a developing world perspective, can be broken down primarily into a managed grid and an off-grid population, right? Both on the consumer and the business side, right? So on the managed grid side, I mean, there's a lot of policies. There's a power policy, there's an ARE policy that addresses that. But the off-grid segment gets missed out. This is a part of the country, for example, 30% of the population is right now off-grid. 50% of the industry is on captive generation. So we consider them to be off-grid. So I think while we are talking about a lot of policies that have come through, including the ARE policy that's been designed for the managed grid part, the off-grid population has been primarily ignored. And that's the bit, Sam, I would like to focus on. And I think what we need to focus on is at the heart of it is an energy problem that needs to be solved. I feel that, the fact that RE has renewable energy sources have become more economical is a fact. So I feel that the best solutions available to those energy problems are renewable energy-based solutions. So I think it's no more a paradoxical problem. It's more economical, it's available, and it can solve some of the key problems we've got in terms of energy. I would talk about, I'll break down the off-grid problem into two parts. One, there's this 50% of the industry that's off-grid. It's primarily using gas, which is an imported fuel for us, very, very essential resource that is being burned in very inefficient engines in the industry, complete waste of resources. We've got a huge balance of payment issue as a country. So I think solving for that is solving for a lot of economic problems that we've got. Now, what are the issues in terms of offering solutions to that industry, primarily SMEs? There is a state bank policy that allows for renewable, financing at very concessional terms, but I think it lacks transparency at this point. The kind of problems we face, I mean, we have done about 100 megawatt of projects so far when it comes to primarily captive industrial customers. And we can see that there's a lack of transparency with that scheme. We don't know what are the limits that the banks have been allocated. How are we doing against allocation of those limits? That whole process needs more transparency. The second thing, I think, the USAID guarantee scheme that we had earlier, I think at least it allowed us to get, private PPAs off the ground. So I think if you need bankable projects, you need guarantors, and for SMEs and small companies, very, very difficult to organize collateral and guarantees. So I think that sort of a revival of that sort of a scheme, I think could be very useful. I personally found it very useful. We did the first PPA, private PPA on the back of solar plant back in 2017 in Pakistan, and we used the USAID scheme. It was very, very useful. So I think it should be revived. So I think on the captive side, I feel, those are some of the two of the key things with regards to finance. I feel if you have more transparency and you have, USAID type institutions coming in as, risk takers, I think that could improve things. Secondly, I would say, what makes a project bankable? I feel that, you need standardized contracts. We spend a lot of time as industry, educating banks, regulator, customers on what should be a bankable contract. And there's no defined standard, unfortunately, in the market. While there's a standard there, and World Bank, it took that first step in terms of defining what the standard IPP contracts are. There's no standardized contract when it comes to dealing with private customers. I think that issue needs to be addressed if we want this market to scale and for lead times to reduce in terms of, closing bankable projects. That issue with regards to standardized contracts need to be resolved. I guess this is where PFAN and USAID can step in and help define those standards. Working with the Alternative Energy Board, I think it's a need of the hour. If I just then transcend into the off-grid, consumer side, and I've been discussing, I was discussing with Peter the other day, what the challenges are, and we operate in all sorts of geographies. 30% of the work we do is in these off-grid locations where there's no access to grid, and here the populations are very sparsely located. There are no dense demand centers that could justify us putting let's say a microgrid solution, even though in many cases, I can tell you that we are a large provider of power to telecom towers. And the phenomenon is, a rural customer would have access to telecom connectivity, but to charge that mobile, they'll have to take a bus, pay the fare, go to the nearest restaurant that we call a dhaba in Pakistan, which is running a very dirty diesel operated generator, and get their mobile charge over there. There's inconvenience, there's a disproportionate cost per unit that those village people are paying for access to that electricity. We have a telecom tower that's being powered up, by renewable sources in many cases, and through a very stable connection. We could easily extend that out to those populations. What's stopping us is the fact that when we think about a microgrid investment for private sector being a commercial organization, paybacks are too long. in many cases, it takes many years to develop a utility type model where more and more commercial load, could be made available over the years, but there's no 5-year, 6-year payback. For commercial organizations to take that leap, it's very difficult. So I think there, if we can work on shortening the paybacks on those microgrid investments for private sector, be it through blended finance, through first loss, instruments, through equity or quasi-equity instruments, I think that would be a great help in terms of, promoting scalable structures in off-grid rural populations. So I think those are some of the points I would like to raise. And I think I just want to make a final point with regards to the government. And I think this is the reason I want to split this problem into managed grid and off-grid. Now, when it comes to policy making, the focus primarily, I feel that 90% of the time, we hear about the managed grid part. All the power you're generating through IPPs is going to the managed grid. That grid, as some of your Q&A would suggest, that some of the questions are, focused on, we have a surplus, supply on the managed grid side. So I think any policies you create to promote more power going into that grid is exacerbating or adding to the problems we've got. I think the policy making needs to now focus on how do we solve for the off-grid, bring that off-grid demand back into the national fold, national planning. How do we do that? I think the government has to move incentives and policy making into the off-grid direction and not into the managed grid. The managed grid part should be left to the private sector because this is where the commercially viable projects are. The unviable projects where the government needs to be, taking the first risk, first loss is on the off-grid side. And unfortunately, I can tell you that the frustration is every policy comes out from the government and says, we will leave the government or the market forces to figure out how to solve the off-grid. They're not going to solve the off-grid because this is not commercially viable. This is where the government needs to step in. Just a final point, you leave a $100 note on the road, it's not going to be left there. Somebody's going to pick it up. So the government needs to create incentives in the right direction to solve these problems. Unfortunately, those incentives aren't there. I just want to make a final point, which is with regards to e-mobility. Some of your questions are with regards to what's happening in the e-mobility space. I feel that there you need an integrated approach. We don't have enough power. We don't have enough capacity in the infrastructure to support scaling up of e-mobility in Pakistan. So, I think rest of the world is very similar. So I think we need to take an integrated approach to generation, charging, mobility. In terms of solving that, we have to make it subscription-based. That means financing needs to be available because of high cost upfront of electric vehicles. Again, there, I think we need bankable projects. To enhance bankability, you need standard contracts. You need, somebody needs to step in and bring learnings from rest of the world on how standard contracts are written in the e-mobility space, make that available to the wider community, business community, so we can all benefit from that. Just one final point, Simon, because this time is short. I'm just, thinking about all the things. When you talk about SMEs and supporting SMEs in renewables sector, I mean, these are all learnings I've had, growing a business in Pakistan. The biggest issue is working capital, right? So don't just think about supporting bankable projects. There has to be something done for promoting working capital or for providing working capital to budding entrepreneurs, to new companies. They have to pay their salaries. They have to hold some inventory to support demand coming from the market. They have to compete with the big players out there. To do that, it's not just they need financing for bankable projects, they also need working capital finance. So I think this is another area that PFAN and USAID should not ignore, especially when it comes to supporting new entrepreneurs and SMEs. Thank you, Simon.
So much, Mujtaba, for your very valuable insights. You only really get these when you get your hands dirty and you work in operations and trying to grow a business. And thank you for raising the point about integrated thinking, because everything's being done in silos here. And these are integrated, interdisciplinary projects. And so I personally feel that thinking really has to change. So thank you for that. My next questions are directed at USAID, Mr. Donald McCubbin, the Director of the Office of Energy, USAID Pakistan, and Rabia Bukhari, who's a specialist also with the Office of Energy. So based on everything you've heard and looking more closely at the Pakistan project sector energy activity, what is the rationale, USAID's rationale for the focus on the SME and private sectors, particularly in off-grid, in distributed generation? And are there any specific technologies that USAID is looking to target, and what are the expected benefits within the Pakistani context? Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much. I think Ravi is going to start off, and then I'm going to chime in. And then I also wanted to throw in some comments from all the very interesting things that I've heard thus far. Ravi?
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Sama, for the question. As we have already discussed in the earlier session before the formal panel started, that why the focus is SME here. As we talk about this small and medium-sized businesses, they have a very large fraction of the businesses in Pakistan. And the problem the SMEs often faces are the lack of access to finance, given that they don't have enough technical knowledge and financial capability and know-how of the new technologies, and they face access to finance issues also, that they are not able to present their ideas and proposals far better in a language which investors and financiers understands and find it more compatible to their financing schemes or their objectives of financing certain projects. So we are entering into the space of distributed generation and off-grid, given that Pakistan is highly populated, dense countries, and as Mushtaba and others has already pointed out, that the rural community is the one living in off-grid areas. They don't have access to electricity. So developing the solutions specifically to off-grid and distributed generation for those areas would be our priority, given that the connectivity for the distribution sector may and may not go to all the villages that needs to be electrified. And electrification would not also serve the purpose there, because if the grid capability or grid is not able to cater the larger region and larger population, unless they build new lines and new stations, substations to evacuate power, it gets challenging for the distribution sector to actually provide power to all the distributed off-grid located communities. So that is why, as in other parts of the world, people have developed a lot of sustainable, good financial models to actually provide access to electricity to these villages. So that is why we want to come up with such a financial and viable model in Pakistan as well, with the help of PFAN, for off-grid communities and where the access to electricity is lacking due to poor connectivity, grid connectivity. That and access to finance is the speciality for the PFAN, where they will be creating investors forum, working with entrepreneurs and smaller businesses and new businesses also, to help them refine their business proposals, better present them, and do the matchmaking for the financing. And this segment, SME sector, within Pakistan economy can play a significant role with low investment and building a capacity. They can go further at their own to build up the communities and provide electricity and other means of resources. That is what I think the main purpose is for USA to focus in that side. Don, if you have anything.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rabia. And wow, this is, I find this really interesting. And I wanted to, I mean, first on the off-grid, I think off-grid is really challenging. And as far as I can tell, it's kind of the holy grail. If we can like figure out some way, I mean, as Mujtaba mentioned, $100 bills don't just lie on the ground, they get picked up. And if there's like $100 bills all over the place with off-grid, we'd find people have got electricity there, and we don't. And so like trying to figure out how to work on this. And Mujtaba, I had a million questions as you were talking, and so at some point it'd be good to have a more in-depth conversation. One of the things that has been alluded to at various points, I think, is that this new activity is going to be doing a scoping plan and exploring what might be interesting possibilities. And so off-grid is certainly going to be one area. And if we could like figure out something that works, that would be great. Kind of the problem that gets raised is like coming up with public finance and some means to support the private sector to do this sort of work. And unfortunately, public finance is really challenging. And so I'll say that. One thing that's I explored in Mexico and maybe as we think about climate projects, one thing that might be interesting to explore, and again, there's lots of caveats, and I say this with some trepidation, but it's carbon credits. And to the extent that we're working on carbon projects, maybe there's carbon credits that can be sold. And I think the trick is that the market for carbon credits has not been steady. The International Air Transportation Association is starting I think it's starting this year, or maybe it's next year. They're going to be starting or making a requirement for any growth in emissions that the airlines need to buy carbon credits. This is going to turn into a lot of carbon credits. Maybe this will be a possibility. And yeah, so I would throw that one out there. Kind of the other things that, what I'd love to see this new activity promote is things that really haven't been tried before. And it's a bit of an experiment, this work that we're doing. And it's hard to know in advance, like what is going to work and what's not going to work. One of the issues that comes up, and maybe it'll get more and more resolved because it's going to be cheaper and cheaper, is storage associated with solar and off-grid. And storage now seems to be, much more price has gone down. It's much more cost effective. Mujtaba, you mentioned the USDD guarantee. There still is a guarantee. It's not large. It's through 4 local banks, and maybe it doesn't get much airtime, much publicity, but that guarantee still is around. Although maybe you had used an earlier variant, and I've been here about 1.5 years, and so I wasn't around when you worked on that. So I just wanted to let you know Rabia is leading the work on that. There's many other things. I guess one of the things that I'm interested in and love to see USAID support is electric vehicles. Seems like this is another one, like storage. Electric vehicles are essentially moving storage units, and the price of storage is going down. Electric vehicles price is going down, and they're really going to be taking off in the future. And then just one last thing that kind of stuck out was working capital. And yeah, I'm interested in exploring that kind of offline and seeing kind of what might be doable. What I'm hoping is that as PFAN UNIDO does this scoping study, that we explore ideas like this and see like what might be doable. Anyway, I'll stop there, and thank you.
Thank you, Rabia and Don. And Don, just quickly to your point about carbon credits, since the decline of the CDM carbon market, the voluntary carbon market is still very active in bilateral schemes. So that is really worth looking at. And each one has a very different investor lens. So we should focus on that. And as you know, it's very transaction cost heavy. So you have to make sure it justifies the transaction cost but certainly we will look into it. Our next speaker is Peter Story, who is the Global PFAN Coordinator. Peter, why do you think advisory services are important? They're not always valued by everybody, and why just having money is not enough? And also, as you know, PFAN Pakistan has been active in Pakistan for a couple of years in originating projects and facilitating investments. How do you see this new enlarged project building on that experience to facilitate more investment? Thank you.
Thanks, Saima. Great to be here. And it's difficult coming at the end of this panel with so many questions being thrown up and so many ideas. And I see that there's a tremendous number of questions and prompts also in the Q&A. I'll try to respond to your questions and perhaps reflect on some of the things that Don, Mujtaba, and Dr. Salim have been saying, if I may, in my response to your question. I mean, the importance of advisory, if I can start there, I mean, I think what we see is that early stage companies, particularly in the SME space, they understand that they need money to implement their ideas and their initiatives, but sometimes that actually isn't enough, and sort of a water can or a scattergun approach, talking to investors just really doesn't work. And what I think we try to do at PFAN and the value that we bring is to work very closely with the developers, with the entrepreneurs, to firstly help them understand the value or their own value proposition, and to really hone that value proposition so it's a value proposition that can be communicated to investors intelligently. And then on the back of that, once we've understood what the value proposition is, to really understand what sort of money you require. You know, going to an investor, going to a commercial bank, and Dr. Salim will know this very well, going to a commercial bank when you actually need equity doesn't help you. And many developers, many entrepreneurs are wrapped up in the technical aspects of their projects. And what I think we really do is help them understand the commercial viability. We translate that viability into bankability or investor readiness, as we prefer to call it in PFAN, and then approach the right, in inverted commas, the right investors. So if they're looking for equity, we make sure that we're approaching equity investors. It sounds simple, but it's things that people miss at the front end. And you know, equity is a big scope in itself. Are we looking at more development, impact-orientated equity with a softer return, but many development benefits attached to that? Or are we looking at harder commercial equity with high rates of return? And if you get that equation wrong, you're wasting your time and the investor's time automatically by going to the wrong investor. So identifying and introducing the right investor or the right financial partner is a key sort of part of this. And I think that's where the value comes. And then having identified the right counterparty, actually packaging it in a way that that counterparty wants to see. All investors, all financial institutions have ways that they like to see information. It would be wrong for me to say that we understand every institution's minutiae requirements, but we really do understand what commercial banks are looking for, what impact equity investors are looking for, what venture capital equity investors are looking for, and how they want that information presented. And in many cases, we've developed relationships with those investor groups, with those investor categories and individual investors. And having done one deal with them in the past makes the next deal a lot easier. The door is open a bit wider, and the door is open a bit longer. And that opportunity enables many more investors to come through, many more developers to come through accordingly. So I think that's really the value that PFAN is bringing. Coupled with the fact that we're providing these services through the network. And the network consists of people such as yourself, Saima, highly capable, experienced individuals who've all had experience and have got a track record of doing this in the markets that we operate. And one of our tasks in PFAN over the next couple of months and indeed years, is to build that capacity, the network capacity in Pakistan. And that's one of the, the great advantages of having this funding now from USAID to build the network capacity to be able to establish the ecosystem that Dr. Salim was talking about, or part of that ecosystem, to have the local capacity to work with people like Mujtaba or other developers and entrepreneurs that understand the local context, that understand the push and shove involved with dealing with the regulation and government in Pakistan that doesn't exist elsewhere, and that understand what we've heard from Mujtaba just about, the problems of off-grid and microgrid in the local communities. So that's again a really big value of PFAN, that we develop this local ecosystem or part of the local ecosystem, and avoid having to fly in highly capable and sophisticated advisors from wherever it might be, who have got the track record and the investment understanding, but don't understand the local context. And I think that lifts the whole development paradigm in the country. I'd like to say a couple of words just to respond to both Don and Mujtaba's comments on the working capital aspect and the lack of early stage capital. This is something that we recognize, I think, extremely closely, and it resonates with me very highly with all that we see in PFAN. A couple of points. We are working not just in Pakistan, but across all of our operations at the moment to create what we are calling micro equity and micro mezzanine funds to address this early stage capital problem. And in Pakistan particularly, one of the areas that we've agreed for investigation, and we imagine in due course implementation, we'll be looking at this, as Don mentioned in the scoping, is an early stage incubation fund to take care of this early stage capital problem that I think has been identified. I'm not sure that we will have all of the answers, but hopefully we'll be able to provide some of them and be able to support some companies along those lines. And I think, again, looking at the working capital requirements of companies as they come in and request our support, that's one of the things that we're doing as a matter of course within PFAN, to make sure that any project developer or entrepreneur has the runway to be able to get forward to project and financial close. And this is again comes back to our core value. Many developers, entrepreneurs don't understand how long it takes, how patient they need to be, how difficult this is. I don't want to send negative messages at the end of this panel, but it is a difficult, long process. And you need to understand, and you need to have the resources available to be able to stay the course. And that's again sort of setting the expectations is where I think PFAN is helping. I'll stop there. I see Peter is coming in as well, which probably means we're running on time. Thanks very much for the opportunity to provide some responses to all of the questions that have been coming.
I want to thank all our panelists for a very rich discussion and insights that would be very valuable for Pakistan. In particular, the off-grid and distributed generation space is where the opportunity is in Pakistan, but where also some of the access to finance challenges are, and risk mitigation products and government policy and differentiating, as Mujtaba said, between managed grid and off-grid will be very important. And to talk about bankable risk mitigation is at the heart of what is bankable. And so PFAN can very much help do that, not only for project developers to put projects through the correct investor lenses and to help with risk mitigation, but also work with FIs. As we spoke, FIs overprice the risk and don't know how to assess these projects, in helping them to translate the technical risk to credit risk and hopefully create credit enhancements. So thank you very much. And to our participants, we look forward to hopefully receiving projects for you to fill our pipeline. Thank you.
So everybody stay on, keep your video on, panelists. So Don, and so I'm just going to do, these are not closing remarks, these are just wrap up remarks. And I wanted just to join the panel and say a few things. First, very dynamic discussion in the Q&A, exceeded our expectations. All questions will be answered. We'll send an email to all participants afterwards with a link to the recording, a Q&A report, and Patrick Nussbaumer's presentation slides. So we just don't have time to answer all the questions, and we can't really, we need to respect people's time, and it's been a good, rich 2 hours. Second thing is, it's clear that the PPSE is a timely project, and it's well aligned with the government of Pakistan's high-level policy and strategies. So it was good validation after the remarks we heard from the ministers. Third is, we do have some confidence that we can stimulate the market and address some of the persistent barriers to engage the private sector as requested by the minister. Fourth is we're open for business. And so what does that mean? That means that the PFAN UNIDO team is looking for projects, as mentioned by Patrick, we're recruiting for 3 of the key positions, and that is on the UNIDO website, and has been referred to a couple of times. PFAN UNIDO team will be doing a scoping report, scoping out areas for focus on the project. And finally, UNIDO and the PFAN team is extremely grateful to USAID and the government of Pakistan for their support and trust in this project, and also to all of you, the participants, and particularly the large number of private sector participants. So with that, I'd like to invite the other panelists, Patrick, Hama, Nadia, our technical support person, Pacharan, who ran the webinar, and Umar, who made it all happen behind the scenes. And we're just going to say thank you. Hama, if you're there, turn on your video. And Umar, please turn on your video if you are. And okay, well, we'll go with what we have. So thank you very much, and goodbye, and we'll all be in touch. Bye-bye.